evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jack Douglas. Tonight's Armchair Vacation covers a lot of ground, so we'll really have to move along. For tonight's Armchair Vacation, we're going to spotlight a variety of places, people, and things. This 30-minute tour will crisscross America, north, east, south, and west. Literally, a crisscross caravan. Chicago by the shores of Lake Michigan. Every August, the Chicago Park Department sponsors one of the most spectacular water shows in America. The water skiers have the spotlight for the first part of the show, and here are just a few of the performers. Next, the parade of beauty queens, each representing one of Chicago's many beaches. The water-going autos are furnished by the Amphicar Club of America. And here's that fellow we've sung about, the daring young man on the flying trapeze. And how about this flying machine for an open-air ride above the lake? But now, one of the most unusual films I've ever seen. Watch this. The parachuters are called the Golden Knights, and each man is a career soldier in the U.S. Army. This tremendous August show features speed on the water and speed in the air. Precision flying by the U.S. Air Force jet pilots, the Thunderbirds. The final curtain, a Chicago Fire Department tug spouting colored water, all the pastel shades of the rainbow. In San Diego, California, the Chamber of Commerce claims the city has the most beautiful climate on the Pacific coast. Sunshine and a delightfully pleasant breeze. And where there's a breeze, we're sure to find members of the associated glider clubs. Torrey Pines State Park, just north of San Diego, is one of their favorite glider fields. And the young lady getting into the glider is Miss Gail Smith of San Diego. The man at the winch is ready, the flag is up, down, and the glider takes off. That piece of cloth falling away from the glider is tied to the tow cable hook that's just been released by the pilot. Well, we're aloft now, and the best description I can think of for this type of flying is simply this. There is no vibration, only the sensation of floating on air, much as a bird soars with outstretched wings. A half-hour's drive south of San Diego is the border town of Tijuana, Mexico. And for most Americans, Caliente Racetrack has replaced the Bull Ring as the #1 sports arena in Tijuana. This attractive building is the Highlight Palace. And at nightfall, these men, playing under the soft lights of the big court, perform for big purses in one of the fastest games known to sports. It's jai-alai at its best, and in any language, it spells excitement. Another of Tijuana's attractions for tourists is its variety of restaurants, and at least several of these are quite good. Tijuana's main street is called Avenida Revolucion, and one of its better stores is the Tolan shop, specializing in Mexican-made gifts and art objects. We're greeted by Mr. Jesus Perez, owner of the shop, who shows us some of the beautiful handcrafted creations he offers for sale. The Tree of Life, made of ceramic clay, price 110 American dollars. Brightly colored paper flowers, this hand-blown green glass fish, a ceramic Mexican hairless dog, and the magnificence of solid brass and a shining candelabra, price $75. The Virgin of Loretta, made of sterling silver and encrusted with semi-precious stones. And the most expensive item in the shop, an old hand-carved door, worth $400. The Tolan shop in Tijuana, and it's well worth browsing. About 3 miles south of Tijuana, in a quiet residential district called Chapultepec Hills, we stop at the Church of the Holy Spirit of Santo. It was designed by an architect from Mexico City, and its beautifully executed stained glass windows have been so placed as to catch the sun's rays during the greater part of the day. The unfinished altar will take on new radiance when craftsmen cover it with mosaic tile, as shown in this picture. Now we're traveling far north, back in the USA, and this tree-lined highway takes us to the countryside near the town of Ocean Lake, Oregon. Here at Lacey's Dollhouse and Museum, we found one of the most outstanding collections of dolls anywhere in the country. One of the owners, Mrs. Lacey, shows us a doll made in the likeness of Queen Isabella of Spain. Altogether, there are over 4,000 dolls in the collection, representing almost every country in the world. If your youngsters are hungry, the Pixie Kitchen along Oregon's northwest coast is a recommended satisfier. The walls surrounding the room offer a display of animated storybook characters that makes children's faces light up, from a tiny red train to a sailor hanging onto the back of a whale to an elf in a balloon. It's all here for the delight of the young at the Pixie Kitchen. This large, rustic-looking building stands in a park near Canyon City, Oregon. It's the visitor center for this cavern called the Oregon Caves. Ranger Robert Vikland starts our tour with a stop at the Beehive Room. And then, wending our way around a corner, we find ourselves in a cavern called the Banana Grove, but we're not going to try picking any of these bananas. They're rock hard and partially covered with a growth of slippery green algae. Here's an interesting fact. The plant life didn't appear until 1937, when the Park Service first installed electric lights in the cave. This high-domed cavern is named Joaquin Miller's Chapel, and here we can see the action of dripping water that slowly forms stalactites from the ceiling down and stalagmites from the ground up. This now is Juneau, Alaska, and not far from the Juneau Memorial Library stands a tall, hand-carved totem pole. It's called a witch pole by the Indians of Juneau, and it's believed to be over 100 years old. It was originally created in the Indian village of Suquan on Prince of Wales Island, and like all Alaskan totem poles, it was carved to depict the characters in a native legend. While at Juneau, we boarded one of the state-operated ferry boats that ply Alaska's inland waterways. She's the Taku, and she operates the year-round. From the deck, we have an excellent view of the icy green waters of the Lynn Canal and the cloud-capped peaks of the Chilkat Range. The Taku can carry 500 passengers, and it resembles an ocean liner more than a conventional ferry boat. Here we're passing the Eldred Rock Lighthouse, a lonely sentinel manned by U.S. Coast Guardsmen. And off our port bow, on its way to Juneau, is the summer cruise ship Prince George. You know, I think it would take years to explore all of the canals and rivers of America's largest state. These are the rolling green hills and cloud-painted skies of Wisconsin, and in the distance we see the spires of a shrine called simply Holy Hill. The old Romanesque-style church stands on a 1,500-foot rise and is visited each year by 500,000 people. The church and monastery are officially known as Shrine of Mary, Help of Christians. Well, this unique church, combining with a quiet countryside, gives one the feeling of peace and serenity that seems to be the trademark of that part of America which is uncluttered, uncomplicated, and unspoiled. Our armchair vacation is far from over. There's more in store in just a few moments. On any vacation, it's the people we meet who are just as important to us as the interesting places we see. And this gentleman in his 90s is certainly one of the most unique inhabitants of Sun City, Arizona, Mr. C.B. Tracy. Now, Mr. Tracy awakens each morning shortly before sunrise, puts in an hour's work, goes back to bed until 10 a.m., then gets up and plays 18 holes of golf. His job? Well, at the age of 90, he delivers 300 newspapers daily. And his aim, I might add, is excellent. C.B. Tracy, America's senior newspaper boy. Looking at this town with its conventional activity and small business district, we might be tempted to think that it's just an average American city. Well, it's hardly that, for this is Westport, Connecticut, and it probably has more artists and actors in residence during the summer than any other place in America, excepting Hollywood and New York. The Westport Playhouse looks more like a large barn than a theater, but for 35 years, it's been the mecca for hopeful young actors and actresses from all parts of the country. They're called apprentices during their first 2 seasons, and they paint scenery, run errands for the producer, and work in the theater office. They all share the hope that the day will come when they too can join a group of professionals such as this cast rehearsing on the lawn of the Playhouse. The play happens to be the London and Broadway success, The Private Ear and the Public Eye, and heading the cast, the talented Miss Tammy Grimes. On a quiet country road a few miles from Westport, Mr. Stephen Dohanos picks up his morning mail and then leisurely strolls along a wooded path that takes him to his small studio. Mr. Dohanos is noted for his work in the fields of fine art and magazine illustration, but why did he pick a small town like Westport rather than New York or Paris or Rome, the meccas of the famous artists? Let's listen to Stephen Dohanos.
This church that I'm painting is about 3 or 4 miles up the road at Easton Corners. And I think this answers a question so many people have asked me. They say, why are you content to paint in this community when you could be painting almost anywhere in the world? The answer is, of course, that the artist can find subject matter right in his own backyard. Most of my ideas stem from community life. The things that my neighbors are doing, my family's doing, the town is doing, the events, sporting events, anything, you name it. Point is, this town cooperates beautifully, and I would say that in the 25 years that I've painted in Westport, almost 1,000 people have posed for me. It's not uncommon for me to go down on Main Street and stop either the baker or the barber or the corner policeman, say, hey, come on up. I need you in a painting. So he comes to my studio and poses. The nice thing about this countryside is that it's such a great variety. Now, just 10 miles from here, I painted this beautiful lighthouse on Long Island Sound. It was a nice sunny day, and I enjoyed doing it very much. This painting is of the annual church fair at the Second Congregational Church. It happens every July, and it's an event an artist almost has to record. Nature is wonderful. It puts on several seasons, and one of the most spectacular is the winter season. Here is a nice bucolic country scene of some boys sled riding after school. I would just like to invite you, whenever you're up this way, if you happen to see a fella painting with a portable easel almost anywhere along the roadside, don't be surprised. It might be me.
In St. Louis, Missouri, Forest Park offers many attractions to the vacationer. One of the most interesting buildings in the park is the Jefferson Memorial, but it's much more than just another tribute to one of America's greatest presidents. For this is also the home of the Missouri Historical Society. Now, inside, you can spend hours with never a dull moment. The gentleman exhibiting the antique fire pumper is the Society Director, Mr. George Brooks.
Move those hoses. Man that pumper.
Jack, if you were a fire captain in St. Louis in 1836, you'd be trying to talk to your men through a speaking trumpet like this one. And you'd be using an old fire engine, a hand-drawn pumper, such as the one that's behind me here. This is one of the many exhibits we have at the Missouri Historical Society, highlighting the history of St. Louis over its past 200 years. From the very beginning, we've been collecting and been interested in preserving our region's heritage. We have, for example, portraits of the two founders of St. Louis, Pierre Laclede and Auguste Chouteau. St. Louis, too, as you know, was considered the gateway of the West. And throughout the 19th century, explorers set forth to discover the unknown for the United States of America. First of these were William Clark and Meriwether Lewis, who left St. Louis in 1804 to spend 2 years trying to find the Pacific Ocean for President Jefferson. We have on display now, we're very fortunate to have them, the very telescope they used when they first saw the Rocky Mountains and first saw the Pacific Ocean for our country. We have the guns, powder horns, the watches they carried, and fortunately, too, the journals they kept to record their first-hand accounts. In addition to these 19th century explorers, we have examples from the 20th century, including one of the 20th century's most famous pioneers, Charles Lindbergh. He interested a group of St. Louis businessmen in sponsoring his flight to Paris in 1927, and in that honor, the plane was named Spirit of St. Louis. We have on display, and our visitors can see, the very flight suit that kept him warm over the ocean, the altimeter, the watch that he carried, and curiously enough, a piece of chewing gum that I guess he forgot to chew on the trip. I imagine the rest is stuck under the cockpit at the Smithsonian someplace.
You have to see this to believe it, and I'm glad we had a camera along to prove it. Now, you all just land your private plane at the Country Club of the Hound's Ear Lodge near Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and then join your friends for a leisurely round of golf. And golf is just one of the attractions at the year-round Hound's Ear Lodge. By the way, although it's a private club, it does accept a limited number of guests on the American plan. And P.S., you don't have to own a private plane to belong, but if you do, the management would like to know about it. They'll do their best to protect the pilot from the golfers. And speaking of golf, nearby Pinehurst is known to the professionals and hackers alike as Golf Town, USA. Now hear this. Pinehurst has 5 18-hole courses fanning out from the clubhouse, plus 2 18-hole putting greens, as well as other practice facilities for golfers, all at one country club. This statue of a boy playing golf is also a sundial. In the 1920s, the little fellow was the advertising symbol of Pinehurst, and we were graciously given permission to use these old and treasured photographs many of them dating back years before the golfing boy was created. And these wonderful old pictures make it quite clear that the ladies were in love with the game even half a century ago. And how would you gals like to try hitting a golf ball in a getup like this? The Pinehurst Gun Club, a mile north of the village, also has quite a history. The fact is, if you brag too much about your marksmanship, the members will quietly remind you that the immortal Annie Oakley and her husband Frank Butler were once the shooting professionals at Pinehurst. The club has 5 separate skeet fields and 1 trap, so you can fire a cannon in almost any direction without hitting a soul. At Pinehurst, they love privacy and the wide open spaces. In Goshen, New York, almost anyone can tell you how to find one of the city's most interesting tourist attractions, the Hall of Fame of the Trotter. Inside this handsome English-style building, we're acquainted with the complete story of harness racing. The diorama shows the famed trotter Hambletonian with his owner, William Risdick. This big trotter has been called the daddy of them all by harness racing experts, for in 24 seasons, he sired 1,300 foals. Many of them became outstanding trotting champions. Behind the Hall of Fame building is the historic Trotting Track, so named because of its long history as a home of harness racing. This horse on a morning workout is Joaquin Squaw. She's a 2-year-old filly, and her driver is Jim Michaels, one of the finest trainers in New York State. Joaquin Squaw is a pacer, not a trotter. Now, with a pacer, the legs move in lateral pairs. This means that the animal is supported alternately on the right and left legs. Let's watch this beautiful pacer perform. Our last stop takes us to Stamford, Kentucky. The William Whitley House, seen here, has 2 distinctions. It was the first brick house west of the Allegheny Mountains, and the field nearby was the first racetrack in America. The people, the places, the names, the faces, they'll all be a part of your Criss Cross Caravan in America. We've all seen this picture of Uncle Sam looking us right in the eye and pointing as though to say, "I want you." Well, this is the image most of us think of whenever the name Uncle Sam comes to mind. But have you ever wondered how the name originated? Well, a sign near Troy, New York points the way to the grave of Samuel Wilson, the original Uncle Sam. He was an Army beef contractor in the War of 1812, and soldiers thought that his U.S. Meat Inspector stamp stood for Uncle Sam Wilson. The nickname stuck. Uncle Sam, the nickname of a little-known man buried here near Troy, New York. I sincerely hope that you enjoyed tonight's armchair vacation and that we'll meet again next week somewhere in America. Until then, Jack Douglas saying thank you so much and good night, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls.